So now it's time we zoom out just a bit more on Kate's family pedigree of lactose intolerance, and hopefully you realize now we're looking at a pedigree for a recessive trait. This is what a recessive pedigree looks like. And let's see if we can write down a couple of things that we definitely know from the pedigree. Remember, we might switch back and forth between using these two different types of symbols, the thymine cytosine DNA letter alleles versus the plus minus symbols indicating lactase persistence on the top and lactase non-persistence on the bottom. Now in our pedigree, we know that everybody who's affected is shaded in, and they must be recessive, homozygous recessive. Every individual that's shaded in on this pedigree must be minus minus or CC. Based on what we've learned so far, we know this must be true. Now let's take a look at Kate's parents here. Kate is affected. We know she's minus minus. Each parent had to give her one of their own alleles. This means one of her minuses had to come from mom and one of her minuses had to come from dad. But the question is, what's the other allele? And we already know the answer. Mom and dad are unaffected. If mom and dad are unaffected, that means their other allele has to be a plus. Because if it was a minus, then both mom and dad would also be affected and you'd see them shaded in as well, but they're not. We know they're not affected. This information about the trait has been able to inform us about what their possible genotype is. This is what makes pedigree so amazing. We know immediately what Kate's genotype must be. We know what her parents' genotypes must be. But now let's look at her brother. We know her brother's not affected, so he could be either plus plus or plus minus. And actually the problem here is all we know is that he has one plus. He could be plus plus, right? He could have gotten a plus from each parent, or he could have gotten a plus from one parent and a minus from another parent. We don't know. So that's actually still an unknown variable for us right now. It's something we can't determine from the pedigree. This is one of our limits. Now there's another really amazing pattern that this pedigree reveals to us. We learned earlier that the trait itself of lactose intolerance skips generations. Kate's maternal grandfather is affected by lactose intolerance. Her mother is not, but then Kate is. The trait skipped a generation. But now look at the genotypes. We know her grandfather must be minus minus, her mother must be minus plus, and she is also minus minus. That minus allele traveled from her grandfather to her mother to her. So although her mother doesn't show the trait, one of the alleles that contributes to the trait that Kate has was passed from her grandfather to her mother to her. So for a recessive trait like lactose intolerance, using the information from the pedigree that we've been discussing, which of the following items are true? Now, this can be a very tricky problem. I do not want you to be intimidated, but I do want you to take your time and think about it. These are check boxes, which means there are lots of possible combinations here. I want you to see if you can figure out which of these items are true and check any and all boxes that you think apply. Now, if you get frustrated, don't worry. Go to the discussion forum. See if you can get some other hints about how to figure this out. And if you really think it'll be helpful, go ahead and skip ahead to the solution video. But please, please try and think about this one and answer it on your own first.